Namaste, say, my friends. Welcome to Happy Jack Yoga Podcast. I'm Happy Jack, live from Bethesda, Maryland, visiting a dear friend here. But I'm here live in the podcast with
Happy Hannah and happy Coco, my little Boston Terrier that is snorting right behind me.
beautiful. Well, it's beautiful. It's so nice to be back and to be in community. We just had a Bhakti yoga conference satsang call, and I find it so nourishing. Like some of the students, Patricia was, saying thank you for hosting these, and truthfully, I'm doing it for myself as well. I find it so important to come together in community and to be in conversation, sometimes to celebrate, but also to be able to be real and to be vulnerable. And I appreciated, beautiful souls that were open and shared in that way as well. Actually, those can be the most, at least it really brings me into the present moment when somebody is open and honest and vulnerable and real, and it just makes it very relatable. So yeah, I'm feeling very connected in that sense. How is your heart, Hannah?
My heart is happy and open, and I'm thinking about what you share about the impact of being in community. And I'm
Mm,
thinking about how coming together with like-minded souls, I think,
mm,
um, what kind of heartfelt connection that happens there and how nourishing it is. And I'm thinking about, Happy Jack Yoga is all about connection. And we keep saying that, but when you experience it, then it becomes real. And what I'm hearing you describe is this way of coming together where it's almost like some kind of healing happens in that connection since it's so fulfilling. And we always leave so nourished. Is that maybe the right word to say? Like, how would you describe the impact of connecting?
mm. It's totally nourishing. It's life changing. It's life saving. I'll tell you what, like having just been, we know the story. I just finished 3 years of grad school at the Harvard Divinity School, and so spiritually nourishing. It was just incredible experience. But at the same time, it was taxing. It was demanding. It just required a lot. And now having this space, just this past week or two, and space, and I was on a retreat in West Virginia, and now visiting a friend here in Maryland, and just having things slow down and kind of creating some space and letting go and surrendering, but not, it hasn't been like a complete isolation, but rather being with good people, being in community, being in conversation, and being in practice, like, really up leveling my sadhana, my spiritual practices, and this combination. I never felt better. Like I'm just like, I'm sleeping so good. I'm so inspired. I feel like I'm just like a channel right now. Telling our friend Mars, who I'm staying with, like I'm just channeling just so many ideas and inspiration, and opportunities are opening up. And I feel like, it's for so many years I wanted these kinds of things, and I sought them out by working really hard. I thought that's it. If I work really hard and I put in a strong effort, then I'll achieve or, accomplish the things I want. And that leads to some results. But when we're able to, through this practice of bhakti and through these, this lifestyle, being able to have some surrender and some let go, and being with good people in conversation, just not having to do it alone. It
Mm.
feels good to be able to raise my hand and say, I need help. I need help. I'm right now, I'm saying I need help. It's true. Um, and it's beautiful when we have people in our lives that we can just be with, and whether they have the ability to give the help right away or not, just safe spaces where we can express ourselves, when we're struggling or anything like that.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a resonance of the heart rather than like you're saying you need help, but I think, and then you said, even if the help isn't happening right away, it's almost like in this way, there's a deeper transformation that is taking place where, yes, we need help and support from the resonance of being with people that our heart feels safe with, where we feel like our heart expands. And then also, I think the help is going to be of the kind where it becomes also self sustainable. So it's not about being rescued. It's not that there's a crisis. It's like we're creating something, we're co creating something. And now we're talking about the next stages of Happy Jack Yoga, where our energy will go, what we will create, how Happy Jack Yoga has transformed from
Mhm.
these years where both you and I have been in deep study and
Mhm.
in deep, as I guess, communion would be the right word with the resonance, with the divine, with the transcendent, and aligning that with being a human being and
Mm.
aligning that with um, the capacities of the mind, right? To create something that is useful here um, for
Mm.
other human beings, not just as an idea or as a philosophy. So it
Yeah.
sounds like there's a resonance and expansion, evolution of what we're seeking to create.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's beautiful, just being in that contemplation, in that reflection. On the retreat this past weekend, the teacher is his name's Sachinandana Swami, and he asked, one of the questions he asked is, "What would you like to do with the remainder of your life?" What a great question. Like, what would you like to do? Because we're kind of just, get in our rituals and are just doing the thing and trying to survive and paying the bills and feeding the kids or whatever responsibilities we have. But it was like, okay, and of course we don't know how much time we have. That's some of us might have 70 years and some of us this might be the year. We don't know.
Mhm.
Um, but like to think about that, what would we love to do with the remainder of our lives? And it's, Tony Robbins often talks about the quality of your life is a direct reflection of the quality of questions that you ask yourself. Because we can ask really poor questions. Why does this always happen to me? How come things never work out? Why does she always say that to me? We can ask poor questions, and when we ask those kind of questions, well, if we ask crappy questions, we get crappy responses. But if we really start asking quality questions, kind of expansive, opening, that take our mind away from, because it's so easy to look at our lives, every one of us, no matter our bank account, no matter our health, no matter our relationship statuses, all of us can look at some aspect of our life and find something to be disappointed about. It's just the reality of life. I know people who are wildly successful or wildly beautiful or wildly whatever, but there's still aspects of life that, so it's like we can focus on those, or we can choose to, focus on possibility. And coming back to community, that's what I find being with the devotees in West Virginia, being here with, my friend Mars, being with this community. I find that I'm more likely to naturally focus on good quality questions. And even if I find myself off track, I'm with people that catch me and remind me and bring me back to the essence and bring me back to what really matters. And so it's such a gift. I truly being with all of you, having, seeing right now on video, we got Angie running around in Muskoka. We got Rita in South Africa, and many more who are off video. And Lorna's here, love it. And beautiful to be on this journey together and to be here to support each other. And some days are higher, some days are lower, but there's kind of this vision where the focus tends to be like on moving forward, being our best selves. And so yeah, and thank you, Hanna, for being here.
Yeah, thank you. I love the question that you were asked at the retreat, because it's one that I ask myself a lot. And I forget how you said it exactly, but like what I heard you say is like, what are you going to do with the rest of your life?
Yeah.
And the rest of our life, you said we don't know how long that's going to last, but what we do know is that it's right here, right now.
Mm,
It's not in the future. Connection and healing and fulfillment needs to be part of our present moment, here and now. If we're constantly looking ahead, we all know how that's going to go. That's fantasy and that's speculation. Whereas if we could create harmony inside of our hearts and in our relationships right now as they are, then that's what you're going to keep doing for the rest of your life if you so choose, right? Rather than living in the future. The question of, I find in a way, there's a part of me that feels in a hurry,
mm,
meaning I know that I'm turning 50 in December, which I think is a beautiful thing.
yeah.
And it reminds me of the fact that life is now, and I want to be fully present and available and let go of the programming of adaptation that we picked up as children, because it happens before we can even remember. That's why it's
Mm,
in the subconscious. And it's oftentimes we can see the tendencies and we believe it to be true. However, it doesn't, we can be curious about it and ask ourselves, is it really true, or is it just me creating what I'm used to? We're very
mm.
good at creating our lives in circumstances that feel familiar. And it might not always play in our favor if depending on what we want to create. So that's a good question to
Yeah.
ask oneself.
Yeah, that's so good. And what a brilliant, what a beautiful space to be in, really for both of us. It's a time of transition. I mean, for those who know us well, like we 3 years ago, we navigate or changed our relationship status from, being romantic couple to, being co-founders and business partners and best friends. And so now, we're going through that transition, and your boys are growing up. They're 21 and 24. You're finishing an amazing study. Like this year, you're finishing up the master's program in this yoga psychotherapy. You've got a beautiful new relationship, and it's like it's this time of transition. And what a great time to be asking this question of like, what are we gonna do with the rest of our lives? And I don't know. I just feel like when we're in this space, speaking for myself, in this space of inquiry and openness, is opportunities seem to present themselves, and I'm kind of in this inquiry now around, because if I just really be selfish, if I was just like really selfish, I might just want to live like a really simple life, like go back to Canada, like in a small town country, and just be out in the nature and just like really slow down and do my practices and do my routines and be connected and do some nice little seva, but it seems like because we put ourselves out there and because we're committed to growth and committed to learning and connecting, different opportunities are opening up, different opportunities to study, opportunities to collaborate, opportunities to create. And I guess I'm finding myself, navigating this balance of, do I stay in my comfort zone? Do I stay, really keep it, play small and keep it simple, and it's still okay and a beautiful life? Or do I say yes to everything? Do I see this as like, this is an opportunity, this is a privilege, that whatever this opportunity is, that maybe not, we all get different opportunities. Should we seize them? Carpe diem. And then, or finding a balance between the two. And I think there's no wrong way of doing it. That's the beautiful thing. Whether it's one side or the other side or somewhere in between. And actually, this was great. I wanted to share this. This was such a great little story that was shared by Satchidananda Swami on the weekend. there were three seekers like us, like we're spiritual seekers, and there's these three spiritual seekers, and they come across this great teacher, this great sadhu. And the first seeker, he says to the sadhu, this great sage, he says, what is the secret? Like, what, how do I want to make meaningful spiritual progress in my bhakti. I want to become enlightened. How do I get to where I want to go? And the sadhu simply said, good choices. So it's like, okay, that makes sense. But then the second seeker said, okay, I get that, but like, how do I get to a place where I'm actually making good choices? And then the sage, the wise sadhu, he said, experience. And then the third seeker said, okay, that makes sense, but like, how do I get experience? I want experience. And he thought, and the sage thought for a long time, and then he responded, bad choices. So in order to get, we ultimately want to make good choices in life. In order to make those good choices, we need life experience. In order to get life experience, sometimes we got to make some, call it bad choices, or have different life experiences that might seem, quote unquote bad, but they're learning opportunities, they're growth opportunities. And I know I've had no shortage personally of bad choices, and that has led to experience, and that which has led to some better choices. And this is part of the path.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm thinking about it. What would that mean in the present moment for each of us in our hearts?
Mm,
And what I hear in that is that we do have a choice inside where we're balancing opposites constantly because it's part of the human experience. There's different forces driving us internally. Uh, a push and pull, or we often call it the dance of the opposites that happens in our hearts. Should I go this way? Am I good at this? Am I bad at this? Do I fit in? Do I not fit in? Where should I go? I don't know. I do know. All of this that happens in our inner dialogues,
mm,
you know, how do we navigate that? And if we remember that there's always a third option. So if we're thinking about inner push and pull, it's not just about balancing those, but I think that if we are open to thinking that the universe has an intelligence, whatever we might call it, if it's God or consciousness or I don't know, universal, some kind of constellations, then we know that there's a transcendence too. There's a higher knowledge. So rather than good or bad, what would be another way of being fully present to be able to navigate connection? Like what would that look like? You know, rather than good or bad, what would be an elevated state
mm,
of connection? Maybe it is resonance, maybe it is prayer, maybe it is looking to scripture,
mm.
right?
Yeah, I mean, those are the it is about filling our life and filling our consciousness, filling our awareness with those practices, the prayer, the contemplation. That's why, for example, from the Bhakti tradition, that's why we study the texts. That's why we associate with good people. That's why we do our certain practices. That's why we do some seva, we give back, and cultivating this good character. Um,
For grace, and grace means a download of something that is bigger than myself. Like you
mm,
said, I need help. Yes, we
mhm,
all need, I think, if we're open to it, um, something that is maybe harder to explain in psychology or in philosophy, even,
mm.
if we're open to that.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that grace, because I feel that's one of the beautiful things I appreciate about spirituality, or you could say religion. This idea of a higher power. There was an image I saw at the retreat on the weekend, and it was like a yogi, And he's kind of like calling out to, standing out in the nature, calling out to the universe, to the ether, you know, God, where are you? Like, you know, kind of looking out there, God, where are you, looking sincerely? And then, you know, Krishna or God happened to be standing right behind them, kind of hand raised, I'm right here. You know, like, and just that, I just love that visual that I saw of this person, because sometimes we're doing that, and whether we're calling out to God or divinity or help, you know, to whoever we need, we're people, you know, humans, kind of looking out there and just recognizing that we have, there is this wind of grace, there is this right here with us. And of course that's why we intend to do practices like prayer and contemplation and chanting or whatever they happen to be, to connect to that, you know. And really a big part of the retreat was about developing a taste for the practices, because sometimes they can become mechanical. You know, I get on my yoga mat and I do my poses, or sit on my cushion and I sit there, but I'm just really thinking about my to-do list, or I'm chanting my mantras, but I'm just doing it to try and get it over with because I committed to doing 4 rounds a day, whatever it happens to be. And so we're just really talking about developing a taste, like really, for example, if we're chanting the mantra, pronunciating it, not saying it as fast as we can to get it done, but really pronouncing each word and calling out, like as a longing, a calling out to divinity, and listening, and it just brings intention to it, you know. Like I shared, you know, I'm guilty of, you know, I'm kind of two birds with one stone. You know, I'm exercising, I'm going for a run or a jog at the same time as I'm chanting my mantra. And you know, that's not that that's a bad thing to exercise and chant mantra, but if we're kind of trying to combine and multitask and all of this, we may lose the intention. And yeah, so I don't know, I think it just, being in this inquiry, being in these conversations, and like you say, the present moment, this is it. You know, I think that was an important reminder that if we think, well, what do I want to do with the rest of my life, recognizing, well, this is it right now. Okay, sure, we don't know when it's gonna be over, but right now we have. So what is the choice, the good choice we're gonna make now, that's gonna create the next moment? And that just tends to be the path of life. That's it.
Yeah, I love that. And I don't know where, in what chapter, I think in the Gita, it says that, um, kind of like a way to connect with the divine through the natural environment, nature. Um, there was a saying, I forget who said that. Maybe it was in the chapter 11, where it said that the sun and the moon are your eyes. I think that's such a
Mm,
beautiful reminder that, like you said about the yogi who's seeking for God, and then God is right behind the
mm,
seeker, ways to connect, to remember that um, there is a higher realm that we are swimming in, that is part of us. And
mm.
if we are open-hearted and open-minded, we can seek to unite with that.
Yeah. And that's how, you know, many of it, like I'm seeing our friend Lorna right now. So I'm guessing it's looking, is that Portugal? Yeah, Portugal. Sometimes she's in Jersey, UK, but now I figured it's Portugal. She's in the nature. And we just heard from Evelina on the last call, who's always in the nature in Finland. And Evelina was sharing how, like, that's how she connects to divinity. And she's still, you know, like many of us, kind of discovering, what does that mean? What does God have a name? Is it, you know, what is it? What exactly is it? But she was sharing with us that that's where she feels most connected to divinity, most connected to like the vastness and the beauty. And so it's like kind of cultivating, seeking out those environments, seeking out the space. Our friend Mohanji was sharing on the last call, like the importance of creating a space, a sattvic space that's like clean and pure and intentional. And you know, of course, when we create that externally, then that we tend to cultivate that internally. and all of these things. It's that's what I love about the practice of yoga and of this spiritual path is that it's multifaceted, right? It's not enough just to get on our yoga mat. I mean, maybe that's how we started. That's how I started. Just get on your yoga mat and do some asanas. And that's great. And it feels good physically and has some mental benefits. But then when we start, bringing in the practices, yes, but also the study of the philosophy, also the association with like-minded seekers, and then of course giving it back, the seva, being able to share and contribute to others. All of it is important. It's kind of like a stool. A stool with one leg doesn't stand up. You need at least three, right? And again, and bhakti and many of these traditions have many legs. And so when we have many legs on the stool, it's more sturdy. It's a stronger foundation. So that when we do get shaken, because that's going to happen to all of us in some way, we just kind of a more rooted in our practices, and we just come back to what helps us.
Yeah, sometimes we've built up some inner barriers for
Mm,
love and for connection. And we can look how to melt away, how to work with the inner barriers that we have kind of built up. Oftentimes it's defense mechanisms, avoidance, um, habits from early childhood when we didn't have as much agency or options. And at
mm,
that time, it was smart to do that. But now, if we are wanting to discuss what is the rest of my life going to be,
mm.
then some of those patterns may be outdated, and some of those barriers we've built up in our hearts, we might want to have a conversation with ourselves and be really honest. Where is it that I am stepping into my own way, you know,
Yeah.
just
Mm.
out of habit, subconsciously? And that's what I think spiritual practice would want to kind of melt and work on spiritually,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's helpful to know our habits. You know me, Hanna. One of my habits is I can be very extreme, very all in, and so if I ask myself just to come back to that question, what would I like to do with the remainder of my life? Well, I've gotten to this stage, in my 45th year, of recognizing spiritual life, spirituality, connection to something greater than myself, filling this God-shaped hole in my heart. This is becoming of highest importance. Essentially, taking my spiritual life seriously. So the default response to that awareness and realization is for me to, like Sarah said on the last call, to just go all in and all in. And so, well, what could that look like? Like me, Hannah, I could totally see myself like living in an ashram in India, with a very disciplined, structured environment, beautiful, sattvic, super uplifting and nourishing, but just like everything so deep in spirituality. And some choose that path, a monastic path. But I think what I love about the bhakti, again, having these different legs of the stools, also recognizing seva or contribution is one of the important elements of the practice. And so because of that, I recognize, well, if I were to just live in an ashram in India, as beautiful and healing and nourishing as that would be, I wouldn't be leveraging and utilizing the opportunities and the resources and the other avenues available, that ways that we can serve, that we serve with our yoga community and other ways. And so kind of just recognizing, knowing our nature, and then finding that balanced approach. So I guess for me, what I'm saying is that's helpful for me to come back to the different ways of practicing bhakti or spirituality, and engaging holistically, not just all in on one aspect.
Yeah, because spirituality can become a bypass and quick fix as well, another form of addiction and coping and avoidance.
Mm,
And this is why I think it's good to know that, for example, high need of control, which could be because then you live in a system that tells you exactly what's up,
Mm,
can be a little bit like might want to have a sense of awareness and talk about that in therapy, how the need to control the plot is also a way to manage things that are subconscious that we're not fully aware of. And that's why it's great to combine, I think, therapy and
mm,
self inquiry, like honest self inquiry, because the mind is so good at, it's so smart. And we just find, not that there's anything wrong, like if that is a better habit pattern, that's great, there's nothing wrong with that, but also simultaneously to keep in mind that to be honest with ourselves, that what kind of environments and setups am I creating in my heart to create barriers or to
mm.
not be fully able to surrender or unite with God, if that is what we're looking to do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and I mean, just mentioning there about a therapist, for example, like that's just like another beautiful relationship, an important relationship. And I mean, I used to like truthfully, I think I've shared, well, I guess I won't get into the whole story, but I've known when I was younger, and I knew people that went to therapy, and I was like just immature teenager, 20-year-old, whatever. And I didn't see the value in therapy. Or I thought, maybe you go there if you have some, highly traumatizing circumstance. That's like what therapy is for. But that didn't happen to me, so I don't need it. But now, even though I haven't had like some acute, tragic loss or, something of that nature, now working with a therapist, it's like, oh my goodness, like so valuable being able to just have a space where consistently being able to meet and show up, have a safe space to share. And sometimes it's a celebratory space because that's where I am, or I'm kind of asking questions. And sometimes I'm struggling, but being able to share that and just knowing that there's having someone in our lives that we can have that relationship with. And at least I'm finding, even though we have amazing people in our lives, this community, you as a friend, Hanna, it's important also having someone who's totally neutral. There's no, because as much as like you're a therapist and you do help me and you use your knowledge and tools to help me, but we've known each other for years and our lives are intertwined, and so there's going to be, I don't want to say bias or something, but I don't want to say conflict of interest, like not in any negative way, but it's so important also to have like a relationship where it's totally neutral, totally safe. And I find like that's where I can fully reveal my what is on our hearts, and that's another form of association.
Yeah, it's a different type of relationship with a therapist. It's not, between you and I, we cannot have a therapeutic relationship in that way. Although a lot of elements in our relationship can be therapeutic, we don't have a client therapist relationship because that is one sided. Your therapist never comes to the sessions and tells you what's up in her system, because that time, both of your nervous systems and your brains are focusing on the things that you are navigating. And that is beautiful. And that's the intention of that relationship. But then I wanted to talk about what you mentioned about like having trauma or not having trauma. There's many ways to define trauma, but one way to see it is any moment where we felt helpless, where something was so overwhelming that you were kind of out of control. So imagine growing up, from the moment we're born is where we might have had millions of those experiences. So that's kind of like the basic level of seeing what a trauma is when we're helpless, and then that's kind of programs us into some kind of coping with it because we need to somehow still keep existing. And then there's the definition of small t trauma, which would be like what I'm saying, like little moments of helplessness that we can't even remember. And then the big T would be traumatic events that we can remember that kind of have a deeper impact in, or I don't know, deeper, but a different kind of impact. And then another definition of trauma is when something happens and you're alone about it, that something
Mm,
happens that you can't really share or find ways to, um, process or name or kind of experience in a safe context. And so the loneliness aspect of it makes it traumatic, and it's, can stay in our systems, and science shows that trauma stays in the body, and that the energy of the helplessness or the difficult moment gets reactivated
mm,
until we've somehow processed it. And a lot of it isn't conscious to us. And I think that it's like, why I'm sharing this is because I want to normalize it. It's not like, when we thought in our 20s that only people who are somehow defaulted go to therapy. I think in today's world, we all know that therapy is a superpower and a privilege. Not everybody has access. It's expensive. It's um, time consuming. And it's also important, like you mentioned, the relationship, to find the right person where you can feel safe with that therapist, where you can build a therapeutic relationship because it feels nourishing and challenging and fulfilling,
mm.
right?
Yeah. Wow. Can anybody listening, can you tell Hannah's writing her thesis right now and studying therapy? You got like multiple definitions. Yeah, that's so helpful to hear. And as you describe trauma and like it being this moment of helplessness, I'm just the way you describe that one, I'm like, I'm traumatized every day to some extent, or like very regularly I'm traumatized. So it is so helpful to understand it's not just the big T, although those happen, but these kind of little moments, and even for some of us who may be blessed to not feel overwhelmed. I don't know. I've never met anybody but like that. But the fact, just we were all born, and when we're a baby, we're helpless. I saw a 6 month old baby was here yesterday, and just like laying on their back, very happy, like very. It was a very happy baby, um, but helpless, like couldn't get up, couldn't even roll over, just kind of laying on their back. And so we've all had those moments, and I'm sure that can condition us, those early stages. And our parents all did the best they could, or what they thought was the best, truly. Like unless someone is really, in the very rare occasion where a human is somehow wired a little bit off to be mean, the all parents did, whether they were working too much, or whatever they were doing, you know with the right intention, they just missed the mark.
Yeah, and they too were traumatized. Like some people say that personality is a whole, like personality is a trauma response, and who we become is informed by the tricky things that we navigated. I think that's a little bit maybe a negative way to see the personality, but there's probably some truth to it. And that's okay. It's part of the human experience is to navigate difficulties. So it's okay. And sometimes thinking about it, like now we're talking about trauma and the personality being a trauma response. And then we're saying like, it's so good to go to therapy. That alone might sound very traumatizing, right? And I don't think that therapy mainly is re-traumatizing. Hopefully there's a therapist who can help us navigate and heal. And let's come back to yoga. Like imagine a state of mind or heart where you can see everything with the equal vision that we often talk about. So that means we're balancing the things that we have internalized, the traumas and the events that we had in our lives, we're now bringing them to a different level of consciousness, not denying that they happened and the impact of what happened. So acceptance doesn't mean, in my case, for example, one of my biggest traumas was that my husband died out of the blue unexpectedly when I was 31 due to a virus like COVID. And that was a huge trauma that when I say that I can accept, I have a hard time saying that I can accept it. But what I can accept is the impact of it. I can accept that it happened and the lifelong balancing and understanding and unfolding that happens after that. Being a mother to our boys, being now over his age myself, I got to live longer than him. So all of these things I can accept and integrate. And if that trauma is going to trigger me, probably in a billion ways, but inside I can hold my heart still open and engage in life fully, right? I can integrate the trauma and the grief and the impact without being constantly depressed or somehow spiritually absent, if that would be the opposite of depression. I don't know. So I'm bringing in, I'm hoping to cultivate um I an even mindedness in my heart, a balance in my heart, where I can be fully here and see and acknowledge what happened, be honest about it and transparent about it, and see the impact of it, and take deep learning from it,
Mm.
but um, not maybe get sucked into either or of the options that I could pick, right? So that is an internal balancing and exercise that I might do through my yoga practice, my spiritual search, my self inquiry, my loving both the people who are no longer here and the ones that are now in my life,
Yeah.
right?
I'd love to hear how do you think you got to this place? Because I know people, I know I have loved ones, that people that are close that have had loss, tragic, sudden, too early loss, and it's still 30 years later is debilitating. And so I just because I also want to bring back to what you one thing you said about trauma was that it can have it's when something happens and you're alone
Mm.
and and not having that resource, whether it's a parent or a therapist or a community. And I was thinking for myself, like all the things that happened to me, when things really started opening up is when we started creating this community and having a space where we could share. And it's I know the intention is not to show up and be therapized, but for me it's very therapeutic to be in community, to be in these circles, to be in these conversations. That's been helpful for me. But like maybe there's someone listening who has had a big T trauma like you had. Obviously it's been many years now, 17 or 8 whatever years. um what do you think is, if you were to point to, that got you to a place where you can be at some level of peace with such a loss?
It was a long process. Now it's 18 years that I'm a widow. So, those of you who know me, 8 years into, I met you after that my husband had been dead for 8 years,
Hmm.
right? Um, I don't think I was in a very super activated state of mourning then, but it took me many years to balance and learn to live with that wound, for that, because it was a deep wounding. If I could describe it as a pulsating wound, and it would easily get inflamed, let's say. um, so I think that And my case isn't maybe a great grief story because I was raising children. It was very tricky. Um, so I don't know that it's the most great example of how we integrate healing or trauma, but I'm thinking some of like what I'm thinking instinctively is that whatever we grew up in, the type of environment that we grew up in, we keep recreating that right now, right here. So I grew up in a home where there was not really parents present, so there was a lot of chaos because I was too young to manage what time to go to school or what homeworks to do or dinner times. Like I did not, because my mom was a single mom and had to work, she wasn't as present. And what that means to me today is that I can easily get into a state of a 5-year old who doesn't know what to do next. And so, what I work on today, what I'm trying to describe here is how we integrate or accept that our inner workings are something we co create because we're used to it. So, um, I easily, if things get messy or if I get stressed, my instinct is to create chaos. Like I feel ungrounded. I don't know if I can trust myself or what. Like I look to you for guidance. You've seen me in moments of helplessness, like, Jack, I don't know what to do. Tell me what to do. And your nervous system is relaxed because you don't get triggered by the same things as I do. And you can say, Hannah, I've got this. Here's how I think we should do it. And it helps me regulate again. So, this is internal programming of mine that I take responsibility for, and I work with somatic tools, yoga, therapy, just awareness, breathing, holding myself, holding my own experience without denying it or without, firing up into it, without really, I'm trying not to buy into it and say, hey, that's my patterning. And it's okay. Not every thought and emotion that I have is the ultimate truth. So this is what I mean by navigating the dance of opposites inside. And when we notice those dance of opposites inside is when we get activated, when something feels threatening, when we feel stressed, when somebody says something. I've thought also a lot about relationships and social constructs, friendships. I feel like because I am an expat, I feel like all my deepest girlfriends are in different countries, and I miss having that kind of friendships. Not all of them. I have one here, maybe two if I'm really lucky, and and I miss having those relationships. But then I need to be also honest. How much interaction can I actually honestly sustain? Like it's a dream that I want to have this, that, and the other. But also, I'm the one who creates the absence of those girlfriends, It can't be. I'm in a country with 33 million inhabitants. I'm sure I can find one more girlfriend is if if that was really my deepest value and deepest need, right?
Mhm.
But what I'm trying to describe is that when traumatic things happened like loss, in a way it's also, I don't want to say random, but we come to those losses with resilience or not. Some of us just, for whatever karmic reasons, have more resilience and others do not. And that has a lot to do with how we grew up and what we were told as little babies and toddlers about the world, how we were made feel safe then. And so it's complicated. There's not, oh, do this practice and everything's going to be fine.
Mhm.
It's us being really honest and transparent with ourselves about our heart, about the boundaries we've built up, the belief systems that we uphold, because that's what we know. So for us, it seems like, of course, the world is like this, and we'll keep repeating that belief because that's how we grew up. That feels safe. That's what we recreate in our relationships, in our daily life.
Mm,
So for you, for whatever reason, it's helpful to have structure, right? Probably for me too. Like I was just earlier describing, there was a massive lack of structure when I grew up. For you,
mm,
you've identified that maybe you grew up in a system with a lot of structure, and that makes you feel like here's a safe world for me to exist and to grow from.
mm.
And sometimes that plays in our favor, sometimes it doesn't. And it is just how life is. Not the same strategy won't work with everything. Like, there needs to be a space for spontaneity, right? You practice on embracing change
Mm.
and bringing in spontaneity. Whereas for me, the practice is about creating structure that is helpful for me. So in that
That,
way, you and I are quite opposite. And maybe that's why we were a great match
mm.
because we
And
could
con
fulfill.
and continue to be a match in co-creating Happy Jack Yoga.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was
Yes.
just saying that I was explaining that to Mars last night and Mani J. It's having different natures. Like, you bring out for me fun, spontaneity, flow, like lightness,
Creativity, curiosity.
creativity. Yeah, all these things. Um, I exactly, and I'm kind of structure and discipline and consistency. So it's good to have those balances and um and there's like good in everything. Like in one way, because you've been an expat and you've lived in many different countries, but it's like you have, and I know I can name so many of them, but you've got these deep, dear friendships of women in Liechtenstein, in the UK, in Norway. Aaron's listening to the podcast right now here in Canada, and having, so like there's a gift to that, to having these deep relationships. But we were talking about that at the retreat as well. Like it really is important to have deep, meaningful friendships.
It's everything.
Yeah.
Relationship is everything. Like they say that longevity, like they can say at 50, they can say how long you're going to live based on your relationships.
Wow.
Talking about how to live the rest of our lives. I think we
Yeah.
should all invest in relationships.
Yeah. And do you think, does it need to be diverse? Because you know me, Hanna. Like I have like outstanding friends who are like in a mentorship role,
Mm.
right? And who are like just amazing mentors. And we have such a beautiful community that we meet with almost every day here in Zoom. And I have so those are like and I have like an amazing therapist. I've got an amazing coach. Like I've got really good relationship. The one thing that I don't have, and I'm just curious, this of me, Hanna, like I never seem to have like a close, buddy friend that like I'm living in proximity with.
Mm.
Like even if I go back to Muskoka where I grew up in Canada, there's not, I got my brother who is, I mean, awesome, but I don't really have like I guess what I'm saying, do you think, is it enough to have amazing mentors, therapist, coach, and community who I do consider friends, but they're on different parts of the world? Obviously, I'm sure it's helpful. Do you think it's imperative that I or we also have like an in-person bestie?
I think that you need both, and I do think that that research that I'm thinking of, they were intending that intimate relationships would be important in determining the longevity and the quality of our lives, and even like on a cellular level, they said like healing wise, people who are in intimate relationships heal faster.
And when
But
you say intimate, are you talking like romantic or close friendship also?
I do think that they are thinking couples, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
That's my understanding. I don't know if there was a control group with people who live at their parents' first, so maybe there's no research on that. But I'm thinking about we need both. We need community, and we need proximity. I think as human beings, that would make sense. And and of course, you know, I don't think that that should become a stress, but what I think that you could ask yourself is what are the reasons that you might be hesitant to have that in your heart? What might be the barriers in your heart that um, make you not cater for that? And because at the end of the day, of course, we want these relationships to be fulfilling. That would be the purpose of it, not that they are
Yeah.
intense work.
Yeah.
So maybe the question would be for you, in what ways would it be the most natural and most nourishing? What would the constellation be if you were in an intimate relationship? Because there's also there we might forget that there's many ways of being intimate with each other. Now, right now I'm in a long distance relationship and I've probably never felt closer to anyone.
Mm.
And we meet every so many months because we both have commitments.
Hmm.
And of course, we hope that that's not going to be the future, but how that's going to play out, we don't have a quick answer to,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, your question around, well, anyway, we just have like a minute left here, but
Mhm.
that's good inquiry for all of us to. I'll think on that. I've got some ideas, but let's all think about that. The importance of relationship. Some of us are approaching 50. Some of us have passed by. But if that's the key to how long we live is the intimacy and the closeness and meaningfulness of our relationships. Let's prioritize it. So, but I do. I mean, regardless,
I,
I know I'm single and I don't have a bestie, but I have all of you. I got Rita in South
yeah,
Africa. I got Angie in Bracebridge. I got Evelina in Suomi, Finland. Lorna in Portugal. Moji in Mohanji in West Virginia. So it's a good step in the right direction.
yeah. It is. And someone critical thinking would be like, oh, well, that's a very one-sided relationship because, but that's because we're on a podcast and there's a question in the chat asking, like, do you guys meet regularly each week? We do, but this podcast meets every week. But then we have sharing circles where it's more of a two-way, where
Yeah,
everyone gets to share, not just me and Jack. And
yeah, exactly.
and that maybe that's what you base your comment on, Jack, that in our system we have deep connections
Yeah,
and deep relationships and
exactly.
that are heart centered and fulfilling, because that's what we're looking for in any kind of relationship. I think that the level of fulfillment and kind of expansion that comes through that
Mm.
relationship.
Yeah. I love it.
Mm.
Super inspiring. Well,
Yeah.
we've been going 2 hours straight now. I feel I could keep going, but thank you all for being here. From the Bhakti Yoga Conference into the podcast, and let's reflect on that and the importance of relationships. And if anything, just grateful to be with all of you on this path. So, my friends, wishing you an amazing rest of the day, and we will see you soon. Namaste.
Namaste, friends.